Alrighty, good morning, folks. Thank you all for joining us. Um, we are going to get started. Alrighty, let me just move around here. So before I introduce our speaker, I'll just let everyone know a few things. This webinar is recorded, so we will be posting it to YouTube later on so you can watch it back. You are able to put questions in the Q&A or the chat. We will be taking questions at the end of this webinar. So that's the time when Mike will be answering questions. And I will introduce your speaker. So Mike Haley is president and founder of Landmark Decisions, Inc., a Nova Scotia-based management consulting firm providing worldwide performance alignment, facilitation, training, and implementation services. The prime focus of the company has been to supply guidance on the development of strategic, operational, and financial digital twin of an organization models, which can help organizations improve their business decision-making capacity. Mike has over 25 years experience in developing and delivering professional training on strategic and operational planning and cost modeling techniques. So we're very glad to have Mike join us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Giovanna. Good morning, folks. Welcome on this bright sunny day here in Nova Scotia for those that are enjoying the last bits of summer. Yeah, my background, that 25 years, you may think that 25 years has been since my last photo, so it hasn't quite been that way, but we'll talk a bit about some of that. So our agenda today, mainly educational. We're going to talk about what is a digital twin, and then more specifically, what the digital twin of an organization is. And then we'll be talking about a variety of technologies that support a DTO. And then we're going to go into concepts around what one DTO we're going to use as an illustration, and how they integrate lean value stream mapping and with activity-based planning. And then we'll talk about where some of these technologies fit from some IT advisory and some research firms where they're evaluating DTO technologies. And I'll have hopefully enough time to give you a little demo for one of the technologies that we use in our practice and talk about some of the benefits. So, and as Giovanna said, we'll take the Q&A, but feel free to put those questions in the chat, and we'll take those up at the end. So I won't belabor this. I am a Haligonian, educated at Dal, ironically in chemistry, and actually did that for a while before moving into manufacturing, and then started the business Landmark Decisions about 30 years ago now. And we've always worked quite closely with different technologies in modeling and cost management and so on. And so DTO was a really nice fit, and I'll talk a bit about the history of DTO. So what is a digital twin? So Gartner, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Gartner. They're the world's largest IT advisory and research firm. And they define digital twin as this digital representation, obviously using software to mirror an object, a process, an organization, or even a person. And it's becoming a very, very big market. So every year they do the impact radar, for emerging technologies. And here's the one for 2024. And what this does is basically looks at the time frame. So there's kind of like like a dartboard, and you obviously today or right now is here in the middle. And then as you move out, you get different timeframes where technology will come. So obviously, Gen AI is all the rage, and that's really now. Gen AI enabled virtual assistants kind of sneaking into that now. But if you look, digital twins are actually the second only to Gen AI in terms of market size. That is actually the color of the dot and where it is. I would probably argue that it might be better served almost on the axis between productivity revolution and smart world, because we'll be talking specifically about how DTOs help enhances productivity in organizations. So digital twins can be categorized, and again, this is from Gartner definitions, three types of digital twins. One you may be more familiar with, and if you've had heard of digital twin, more than likely you're thinking of the classic jet engine or, a component in a manufacturing process. So that's a discrete, it's things. Certainly more recently, probably over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of work on digital twins of humans to support, advancements in healthcare and healthcare research. The next group is called composite, and that's really a kind of an amalgamation of a variety of discrete components. So here's the example of a drill rig, which would have many, many individual discrete digital twins that are brought together into kind of a system. So if you're in manufacturing, that might be your production line that could be considered a digital twin. And then organization. This is where now it's broadened beyond the specifics of a composite of using discrete, where we start to look at other aspects of the business. So we're looking at how things like maintenance, how things like finance, HR, sales and marketing tie in to the whole service or product delivery of the organization, what impacts they have, what are the costs, what are the capacities associated with the ability to deliver business, not just from producing the product, but actually supporting it, which could include post-sale support as well, and warranties and returns and things like that. So that's really what our focus today is going to be on, this DTO of the organization. So they define DTO as this, again, software model, obviously digital, which relies on operational and contextual data to actually simulate the business model. And it's really used for supporting strategic and operational decision making with advanced simulation. So basically being able to kind of predict into the future by changing the data or the structure of your DTO in anticipation of changes that would be made in the business. It's a very large market, or expected to be a very large market. I mean, the DT market, as we saw on the impact radar, is emerging, i.e., within the next 1 to 3 years. By 2031, Gartner estimates that the total digital twin market, now that is software and services to support digital twins, will be around $59 billion. And it actually has the highest growth rate of all of the digital twins at about 44%. This was from 2015 to 2031. So again, very big market, a lot of technologies getting into it, a lot of consulting firms such as ourselves obviously getting into this as well. Gartner kind of uses this kind of, I call it navigational analogy, to describe kind of components of a DTO and link those to different classes of technology. So here's kind of the journey, as it were. So the map, i.e., how you're working today, your performance, how you measure how you're working today, and then the situation is where you kind of want to go. Where's the destination, and then what's the value of that? And below this are the different classes of technology that you'll see that are playing in this DTO world. So there's enterprise architecture tools, what's called enterprise business process analysis tools. You've probably heard some things about process mining. There's business analytics, which are obviously very big now, business process automation. So all of these vendors, some of them kind of integrate across this suite, and others are more point solutions, bringing specific capabilities around one particular technology class. But if we look at these three middle ones, which is really the core of a DTO, these are some of the definitions that Gartner has, some of the key capabilities that need to be in a true DTO. So modeling, looking how resources, those would be your facilities, your equipment, your people, how they're deployed. What are the products and services that your organization is offering, and making sure that you can model those resources through the organization. So that's part of the business operating model. Under business performance management, KPIs, not just operational, but financial KPIs as well, service level agreements, looking at time to delivery. And then the ability to do scenario testing and predictive analytics, looking into the future, and also looking at the cost and the value proposition associated with new DTO scenarios. And then finally, under business operations intelligence, again, tying into analytics that provide, near time, or what we like to call decision time results and information, and then the ability to discover and monitor new insights in your organization. So these are all the kind of the promises of DTO. Certainly our research, and I guess supported by Gartner and another firm we'll talk about. Basically, there's no kind of single unifying technology that delivers the full suite of these components, but some are stronger in other areas. And so I'm just going to talk about some of those examples. So Gartner, they do what's called a market guide for technologies that support a DTO, and this one came out last year. They're in the midst of publishing one probably before the end of the year. You might see that, the 2024 edition. In the 2023 edition, though, they list 12 different technologies. And you can see over here, there's the majority are European. A lot of that driven through Industry 4.0, which is quite advanced in Europe. But you can see, obviously, there's some American firms, and we even have a Canadian firm here, Interfacing Technology. I'd certainly encourage you to look them up. They have a very, very robust. They've been around about 40 years now. They've built up quite a suite of both clients and capabilities with that solution and things. So we're going to be today focused on from a demo point of view, so I can give you a feel of what a DTO can do on this product, which is called Qualiware. It's a Danish product, and we became familiar with it through work that we've done with the federal government. It is the Government of Canada's standard for enterprise architecture. And then we'll talk about how that's being used in a kind of a DTO world. So I want to go back to some fundamentals for what you're going to see in this particular flavor of DTO. And we're going to talk about the concept of lean. So lean is really more of a philosophy around continuous improvement and focusing on the customer. And the ultimate goal is, improving the value for clients, to streamline businesses and identify where there's unnecessary steps or waste in the process. And one of the techniques is value stream mapping. It's probably one of the most common tools in the lean toolkit. You may, if any of you have done project management, you may be familiar with this, sometimes called the iron triangle or the triple constraint. Basically, give me any two and the other one will flex. So what lean really does, it really helps rethink the triple constraint, where you can actually increase the time or decrease the time to delivery, improve the quality of the output, and reduce the cost. So it kind of breaks that concept of the iron triangle, only being able to flex two and have the other one be independent. And value stream mapping is very, very good at understanding the time, i.e. the throughput or the lead times associated with product or service delivery. And it's also great at identifying where there are quality issues, where there's rework, where there's inefficiencies in that value stream. What it's not so good at, however, is on the costing. And this is where we would typically look at bringing in other types of tools and methodologies. So activity-based planning is one of those tools that's really, really good at doing costing. So it really complements value stream with bringing that concept in if we can integrate it. And the other thing ABP does is that it's a capacity constraint-based modeling approach. So we can actually understand where the bottlenecks exist in the organization. So let's work through an example. I'm doing this so you'll see when I show you this DTO solution we'll look at today, you'll have some context for that example. This is a regulatory compliance example. It was actually derived from work at Health Canada many years ago now. And basically they have a service standard. Now this is fictitious data. It's not Health Canada data, but let's say this organization has a service standard where they're going to produce a report around the inspection of a manufacturing, let's say a drug manufacturing facility within 15 days of a client request. So that's what they've stated as their service standard. So the process, again, simple illustration here. There's 3 key steps in this process. So they go out and they do a site visit. They handle inquiries, additional information that may be required to produce an inspection report. So those are the 3 key steps. So value stream will typically use this sawtooth to describe the different time components in the total lead time. So some of those are what's called the activity lead time. So that's basically the start to end time for the completion of that activity. Now that is different than what's called the processing time. Think of the processing time as the hands-on time, the amount of resource, let's say people-wise, that are necessary to do the activity, even though this activity may take 7 days to schedule and kind of complete. It's only 4 hours worth of processing time, probably from a planning, on-site time, maybe a follow-up time, and so on. So that's the total, so you can add that up for the total process time. One of the big killers in business processes are the wait times, particularly if you have multiple labor groups or multiple resource requirements, and where the activities information is being passed from one to the other. There's often this wait time. So the total wait time can actually compound the total delivery time. So here we have the total lead time is actually 21 days, which is the total of all the activity lead times and the wait times. So obviously not making their service standard. So there are some other performance metrics that come out of this as well. So one is called the value added ratio. So it's basically what percentage of our hands-on time, processing time, in relation to our total lead time. It tells us how much time we're actually really working on the process versus the total lead time. So a very low number that would be a metric to try to optimize. The other component that you'll see quite often in value streams are what's called percent complete and accurate. And this is really a metric that helps you understand where waste occurs. So for each of these activities, there may be a different percent complete and accurate, which means how often is this specific activity done correctly, the first time. So in this case, we have some that obviously need to have a revisit, some that would have to have maybe callbacks on info queries that only 60% are done right or get the right information the first time. And then even in reporting, maybe missing information, which actually may trickle back and may require more queries to complete the particular report. So with that, you can actually look at what's called the rolled throughput yield for the process, which is really the multiple of all of these percent complete and accurate. So in this case, it's saying only 36% of the time is a visit inspection done completely correctly from beginning to end. So obviously a metric to target from a process improvement point of view. So these would all be KPIs, could be put on a dashboard related to service delivery and targeted for process improvement. Activity-based planning kind of takes the same construct. It looks at that same business process, but it looks at it in a slightly different fashion. ABP was popularized probably about 20 years ago now. This is the group Consortium for Advanced Management that kind of, I'm going to say invented it, but certainly publicized it with this book. Landmark is a member of this. It's basically an independent research, member-driven research organization. And basically how it works is it looks at what are the customer demands that actually drive this business process. So we talk about demands, and also maps out what are the resources required to support that business process. So again, adds additional dimensions to the value stream. And then from a calculation point of view, actually works from the process from the bottom up. So the number of inspections will drive the amount of site visits. The amount of time necessary will require how much field time will be needed, and so on and so forth as it moves up through the chain. So we bring in some operational data or operational metrics, things like output volumes, how much was produced in a time period. We look at what's called activity consumption rates. How many visits typically does an inspection take? May take more than one, maybe it's two. How long is a visit? How much time is necessary? You see, that is actually the same as the processing time we saw on the value stream map. And then we can actually bring in what are the constraints that exist? How many people do we have? How much time are they available? How much equipment do we have? Even capacity on the building. Do we have enough space to house all the resources we need to deliver our services or meet our demands? And this model will then calculate from the bottom up. And in doing so, can actually calculate the utilization, give us some metrics on how well we're using those resources. So these are all operational metrics that actually get around our capacity to deliver. So that complement to that iron triangle that I talked about before. The other component is now some financial metrics. Because resources are now mapped to the process, resources are really where organizations spend their money. They spend their money on their people, they spend their money on buying equipment, they spend their money on space, they spend their money on external resources, in this case, variable resources compared to fixed resources. And then those dollars can now be pulled back down through the model in a second calculation. And because we've already established what the distribution of requirements from the bottom up are, those dollars can kind of trickle down, shall we say, through the model to look at what is the cost of each activity, what is the cost of each demand, ultimately what is the cost to support all of our customers as they place different demands on our business. So that's really what activity-based planning does. So really bringing all of those together, value stream and APP models, so the activities are shared, things like the processing times and even the percent complete and accurate are shared. So that operational dimension is complemented by these two types of methodologies. And then some of the key benefits for that are, basically to have visualization, to do some visualization of the process. I'm trying to move my face out of the way, looking at the kind of the process efficiencies, those consumption rates that we talked about, looking at where waste occurs in the process, those wait times and percent complete and accurates. So all of those things can be now done with a visual model, and when we apply software, obviously, to that to actually do those calculations. Because we're using ABP as well, it brings in this resource capacity dimension so we can understand what are the utilizations of our resource, where are the bottlenecks, how can we avoid those bottlenecks, maybe with alternative resourcing strategies. And again, because resources are mapped, we can map our financials to those. So all of our P&Ls can be kind of pulled into that model, and we can now getting a better indication on costing, on profitabilities, being used for operational forecasting and budgeting, and even on decisions around return on investment for expenditures, capital investments, and so on. So all of this is much more comprehensive than just the operational dimension. So that's kind of one of the value propositions of a DTO. I mentioned this second IT advisory firm. This company is called Quadrant Knowledge Solutions. And they actually do and have been doing for the last 4 years an evaluation of different technologies that support a DTO. So you'll see those 12 that I listed in the Gartner slide with the dark dots here. There's a number of others that they evaluate as well. And this is what came out in April of this year. And you can see this is what they call the leader area. So some of the big names in software, SAP, Software AG, IBM, no surprise. The one, however, I mentioned was Collyware. This is the one that we kind of use, we'll call it our tool of choice, because they have an add-on called Collaborative Business Planning. And that complements kind of what Qualiware is known for, which is compliance management and enterprise architecture. So CBP adds some more functionality to that. In fact, even in the write-up, and I put some links here, and I think we'll probably be sending the PDFs of these slides out to you, and you'll see there are some embedded links here that you can go and look at some of the write-ups. But basically, they say this partnership with CVP allows the visualization, decision making, supporting analytics, scenario modeling. So we're going to show you some examples and some of the work that we've done both here in Nova Scotia and elsewhere with this DTO, this flavor of DTO, I'll keep calling it. So let's do that. Let's move to that. So a couple of examples here. I thought I'd just show you a little bit on the core technology in relation to that compliance example that we worked through. And then maybe we talk about, as time permits, some work that was done at Nova Scotia Crown Lending, Crosby Foods, and if time again, maybe some of the work we've done piloting some work in long-term care. So I'm going to jump over, hopefully. So this is the tool called collaborative business planning. So it's basically starts off as a blank canvas, and then you have a variety of components that you can bring onto that canvas to create, in this case, a value stream. This is the value stream that we saw: visit sites, answer inquiries, prepare reports. We also see, however, there are some other activities, so the revisiting of the sites and the inquiry callbacks, because those are driven by the percent complete and accurate. So if I bring some of these data, I can bring data onto that diagram. So I represent this as different variables. So here's my percent complete and accurate, 80%. I've got 60% on my answer inquiries, you may remember. As I hover over here, I can actually see what the flow and the costs and the unit costs are, because these are activities that are being shared by the activity-based diagram as well, which I'll show you in a moment. So when we calculate this model, I can hit the calculate button, and what this will do is actually determine the actual flow and create this dynamic timeline, the VSM timeline, and actually give us some of those VSM metrics. So the total lead time, the total processing time, the value added ratio is about 7.7%, and the roll throughput yield, which is really the multiple again of these percent complete, and that 36% that we saw in the previous slide. If I move now to the ABP model, basically I still see the same flow: visit, answer inquiries, and prepare reports. But now I see these kind of rework activities in kind of a different context. And there's good reason for that, because basically the total cost and the total resource requirements of visit sites has to include the fact that you have to go out and revisit those sites, because they're not 100% complete and accurate. Same thing for inquiry callbacks. So here we see those volumes, and now we have metrics. So this model actually is a monthly model. Typically, these models are built for time periods. They're validated against known time periods, could be last month or last quarter, with the data and the results, and then they can be used for predictive purposes. So when these models are calculated, so if I hit the calculation, first thing this does, it does the operational flow from the bottom up. So for example, we followed this along. I've got 40 inspections. And if I went up to my answer inquiries, as I hover over these connections, I see it takes 2 inquiries per inspection. So I'm going to have a total of 80 inquiries coming from inspections. From my assessments, if I look at that, I'd get basically 3 inquiries typically for an assessment. So I'm going to get 60 plus 80 that's where that 140 is. And my percent complete and accurate is 60%, which means 40% of these times, these inquiries have to be handled on a callback. So that 0.4 tells me I need to do 56 calls. Each call, I've represented this as a visible metric. My processing time takes an hour and a half. And so basically 56 times 1.5, I think, is 84. And then that flows up into the requirement for the compliance field team. If I open this up and I look at the links, I can actually see, yes, there it is. They flow from the inquiry callbacks. That makes up about 14% of the total flow requirement for that. The biggest one, of course, is visit sites. So this shows me my flows and shows me as I move through the model. Also shows me what's coming in at any point. So I obviously have some supervision. The director is overseeing this team, and there's some space allocation to that team as well, where their offices are. So we can actually investigate the model by kind of drilling into each of these components. If I now go and do the financials, I'm sorry, I should have stayed here. Let me show you the summary results. Sorry, the financials. So here we have some financials associated with the field team. So I have their salaries, I have their benefits. I have these actually represented as kind of unit costs where it's multiplied by the number of people in the team, which gives you my total cost. This becomes very handy when you're doing simulations because I can make changes and have an impact not only on financials, but I can use those numbers in my capacity. If I have more people, I'm going to have higher capacity. So I can see what the impact of those are. So now if I calculate this model for the second pass, which is the financial calculation, up here in the little summary, I actually now see what my total revenue is. So this is just as Health Canada does, there's service fees associated with doing inspections and assessments. They charge drug manufacturers for that. And they look at what their total cost is, and they can determine, are we recovering our costs if you're in the public sector, or are we making money if you're in the private sector? Obviously not in a good situation, actually losing money in this case. And we can actually look and see where those losses are. And the biggest problem is this inspection services. So as we go in now, we can actually investigate by drilling in back into this. So I can actually see, as I saw before, here's my what's called direct costs. And now if I look at my summary, I can see, yes, those direct costs, $24,000. But I also have some additional costs flowing by the fact that I have these support requirements. In fact, if I go back to my links tab now, I can actually see what those link costs are, where they're coming from, and what the actual operational flow is. So it's a kind of a neat technology in that it brings operational and financial information together. And I can actually navigate here. So I could go back down to, let's say, answer inquiries. So I can actually now start to see some of the information on answer inquiries and direct and indirect costs. I can go down to, let's go right down to one of these demands. And I can look at, okay, here's where my revenue is. But I can also look at things like what's called the PMO. These are called primary modeling objects. At any point in this model, it will show me the contribution of any element that kind of flows into it from above, in this case, how much is required and what the ultimate cost of that is. And to keep the finance folks happy, basically, you can actually create an expense statement at any point in the model, which does the tracking of all the chart of accounts as they're kind of split and recombined based on the operational requirements. So it becomes a very useful tool for analysis and investigation. I'll show you some of those real life examples. Some of the real value, though, is in doing this planning. So if I wanted to create a simulation, let's say next month, I expect I'm going to have a higher demand for inspection. So what I can do is I can go and create a simulation. I'm going to call it simulation 1, and let's say more inspections. So what this does is basically creates a kind of a copy of that base primary model, the validated model. And now I can start flexing the data to see what the impact would be. So in this case, I'm going to change it from 40 to 50 inspections per month. This is a monthly model still. And basically, as soon as a data change is made, basically all results need to be recalculated. So we'll do that. And it comes up and says, oh, you don't have enough resource. You don't have enough people to handle that increased volume next month. So now you've got to make an operational decision. So we could maybe add people if you had that flexibility to go and hire another individual and see if that would have an impact. But going root cause, taking a lean approach to say, well, what's causing all these percent complete and accurate? And maybe the people that go out say, well, when we go to the sites, we find that they're not ready. They don't have the right information. So we have to go back. We have to, then have calls and callbacks and so on. So the theory would be, let's do some training for the clients so they know why we're coming, they know what information made available. What would the impact of that be? So working again collaboratively with the team, they may say, well, that would cut down on our site visit time. We could probably go from 4 to 3 hours and see what the benefit of that would be. I could probably get all my information on that first visit. So I could actually change that from 80 to 100%. So now I don't need to revisit. That's the expectation of doing this training. I could now have better information, so I don't have to do so many callbacks. So let's say I take that up to my expectation is probably 95%. Never going to be perfect. There's always going to be something missing. And maybe now my reports as well could be, let's say 95%. So here's a little scenario that we've kind of anticipated to see what the impact of that would be before we commit to doing the training and develop the program and all of that. What is the benefit going to be? Is it taking us in the right direction? So if we recalculate the model, basically what it'll do is actually shows us that sure enough, we don't have any broken constraints now. In fact, if we start looking at the utilization of our resource, we can see we're actually quite low to the point where maybe we don't even need these 4 people. So we could actually maybe redeploy one of these individuals and see what the impact is. So let's try that. I'm going to just reduce that by 1, take that down to 3. I'm going to recalculate that model. You'll see my utilization has now jumped up to somewhere close to where it was before, which is kind of important. And now I can recalculate my model. So I can actually see, okay, now I'm in the black. So I've had a net change of about $20,000. So that's $20,000 a month. So that probably would be more than enough to maybe support advancing the training program. And then I could continue this scenario, add training in and look at some of the resources required to do that training and evaluate that. But for this purpose, let's just show what the impact is on the value stream. So if I go back to the value stream, basically, it'll clear the results from before, and now I can actually recalculate that those metrics and that timeline. You can see I've jumped now, reduce this by about 4 days because I don't have to take this revisit site. I can go direct to answer inquiries, and my roll throughput yield has increased to about 90%. So big improvement, collaboratively done. Decisions now can be made to maybe move ahead with that training program. So just an illustration, kind of how the technology works. Let's talk about some real life examples. So this one is from what's called Nova Scotia Crown Lending. More commonly for us Nova Scotians, known as the Nova Scotia Farm Loan Board or the Fisheries Loan Board. And a few years back, they undertook to do basically an organizational review and actually implement a lean a Kaizen event, and basically we use the CBP tool to actually develop a value stream. I've kind of zoomed out here just to give you a full flavor. Value streams can be laid out in swim lanes. You can actually see, I'll zoom in here and show you the kind of the flow. We do have, kind of the calculation of that. If I just zoom in here, there's the total lead time, which is about 70 days. So it's taking about 70 business days to process a loan application. Obviously, that farmers and fishers weren't terribly happy with that. So they need to understand that business process. So if I go and look at some of this, basically each of these swim lanes are different resources, and I can see the activities that are taking place, what the wait time is between activities, and how much staff is required for each of these types of activities based on the volumes and flows for this was an annual model, so this would show how many of these they got on an annual basis. This was all supported again by an ABP model. And again, it's a pretty busy model, so I won't get into all the details. This shows the different labor groups and kind of the reporting requirements and right up to the CEO, and then the different activities by the different labor groups. So this is the loan admin team. So what they found when they did this analysis, not only was the lead time excessive, but the way work was being proportioned and who was doing components of work. They were able to actually reorganize the business. They created some new positions. They eliminated a couple of other positions, and they then started planning for the future and where they wanted to grow the business, and were able to kind of anticipate that, go forward with actually a budget request to change the organization and implement that over the course of the next year or two, and so on. So it became very helpful in justification for investment in the organization. That's a little one on Nova Scotia Crown Lending. Um, some work we did with Crosby Foods. Crosby, you may recognize them as Crosby's Molasses. They've had a brand name change in the last year or so, and they're based in St. John, New Brunswick. And they're really, in addition to molasses, they do a lot of dry packaging, CPG packaging, both for their own products, their own drink crystals. They do a lot of some of the no-name brands for Sobeys and Best Buy. They also do a lot of processing for Nestle Canada with iced teas and hot chocolates and so on. So a dry pack line, this is kind of an illustration of one particular line, and this is generic. This is based on the Crosby work. It's not Crosby's information, of course, but basically we can see, raw material coming into the production area, going through a pouch filling process where the dry goods are actually added into the pouch, and that pouch is then case packed, and then it's palletized, and then it's moved back to the warehouse. What we can do through colorization, we can actually start identifying some of the key cost of quality items. So failure costs around pouch rework that needs to take place as pouches are misformed, breakdowns in the line, obviously take time and take away capacity from productive work. We have other non-value added activities, so shutdowns to do roll changes for those pouches, doing a changeover from one product to another. So all of these elements can be brought in. I should have explained the little purple dots basically tie into other. This is obviously a larger model with multiple pages. So this avoids having a kind of a spaghetti network of information that's flowing, so you can actually trace this back up to the line and up to the operators and so on. Again, purpose is not really to get too much into the software, just to give you a feel for how these tools are actually being used. And we can see there's a number of metrics here. So you can actually, as we did before, we can actually flex some of these variables in terms of, kind of run size and run speeds and so on, and see what the impact is on overall cost and profitability of those particular products. They can also bring all of this information into value streams. And what's interesting here is a lot of these non-value add activities can be directly linked into the wait times associated with different steps in the components. So the overall total lead time can be greatly impacted by the efficiency of that process and how often it's down or basically change over or rework that needs to take place. So again, it was really insightful. They through doing this work, Cross was able to identify probably in one area of the plant about 18 extra 12-hour shifts they were able to kind of squeeze out of the production from an efficiency point of view. In another area, there were about 10 shifts. They used it also for ROI justification on some new systems they put in place, including robotic arms for case packing in one of their production areas and so on. And they went on to use it for annual budgeting. But costing was really one of the main drivers in this, because they needed to understand cost, because they're a contract manufacturer. So when they do long-term contracts, they need to have a better appreciation of what their true costs are and what the cost risk is, so they could run scenarios and assess those risks to come up with a better contract price and hopefully make it a profitable organization. And last but not least, we'll just touch upon the work we did as a pilot example. This was a pilot project we did with a nursing home here in Nova Scotia, about an 80-bed nursing home, where we looked at really the frontline care delivered through registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and here in Nova Scotia, we call them continuing care assistants. But we did a full costing model, basically looking at all the other components, accommodation, supplies, housekeeping, food, and so on. But the real focus was on the activities to support things like medical care. So frontline care typically delivered by the RNs or the LPNs. Non-medical care more typically provided by CCA. So things like getting them up in the morning, helping with meals, bathing, and then just general care support. So all of that could be brought into sort of a segmentation around the types of residents in the home. So in this case, we just looked at 3 different types: our standard low care, lower care, I should say, moderate care, and then high care residents, probably people near, either palliative or near end of life situations where additional care need to be provided. So we could actually look at what the cost of each of those were. So what was interesting is the ability to actually look at the dashboards. So all of this information basically that the DTO models create can be put out and then analyzed, in this case with Power BI. So they could look at, how much total care time is being provided by the type of resident, what the ultimate cost of those residents are on an annualized or per day basis, and then start doing some segmentation. If they wanted to look at, well, let's look at the RNs. What do the RNs actually do? So we can actually see the RN contribution to high, moderate, and standard care, and what the RN contribution from a financial point of view as well. We can look at this more detailed and look at the comparison across these, the total cost, who's doing what, and how many hours are being spent, and obviously the associated costs with each of these, both from a total cost and then medical and CCA, all the component costs, because again, this was a full model. So the model could also then be used for planning and scheduling purposes. So again, a little more involved than the time we had to present here per se. So the other thing I just wanted to point out too, that these models basically, what I've shown you is the modeling tool. So obviously somebody needs to be trained in this DTO technology to put this together. But from a consumption point of view, typically most users, and again, from a collaborative point of view, will be using a web interface. In this case, I'm gone back to the compliance model where you can actually now see on your dashboard the ABP model and the VSM model. We can get some additional information. If it's a large model, I can search for things. I can get some news here. I also have some ability to do some governance around this. So ideation. So somebody could actually say, I have an idea. Could we try this as a scenario? This information could be vetted and then passed to the modeler for execution and publication of that. So that all of these tiles can actually kind of keep that information. And then you can drill in. So anybody in the organization now with the web access can basically drill into those models, actually see the information associated, just as we did in the modeling tool, but now bring all that information together in kind of a variety of tiles. So instead of kind of going up and down and looking around, you can actually bring all of that. Again, that's all customizable. So it really engages the whole organization. And that's really an important thing from a DPO perspective as well. Okay, I'm going to move back to the presentation. I just wanted to kind of try to summarize what DTO models do. Basically, they take whatever the business operating model, how your work is done today, which can really be described as your processes and your activities that are done in support of your outputs, your products or services, which require your resources, be they fixed or variable resources. So that model construct can be developed in the DTO model. It can then be loaded with operational and financial data, organizational data. Those models then are validated. There's a key step involved in that before looking at them for planning purposes. But ultimately, once those models are validated, they can be used for improving visualization and understanding of business process, either value stream or activity-based plan. They can be used for constraint-based planning as simulations. Where do the bottlenecks exist and how do we potentially alleviate those? And then that information can be shared across the enterprise with web tools and Power BI and analysis tools and so on. So they become a kind of a component and a repository of new information that can help with decision making. And some of those decisions Obviously strategic in nature, so investments, making decisions on adding or maybe even deleting new products, services, and/or customers. Doing sensitivity and risk analysis. I mentioned the Crosby example, looking at what are the factors that could impact the costing and ultimately the profitability of some of these longer term contracts that are being negotiated. Some operational insights, looking at resources, how efficient we are in using those resources, bringing up KPIs into dashboards from that, and then certainly the financial aspects. So looking at the costing and the profitability or ROI justification and forecasting on the benefits of investment. And again, more importantly with the DTO is having that common understanding and collaborative decision making. So the visualization tools really can assist in making the information understandable and I guess consensual. Everybody agrees that this is how the business operates, and that's a really important component. Okay, so that's what I kind of wanted to cover. I did want to make an announcement today, together with Digital Nova Scotia and Dalhousie University. Today, we're actually launching this program, which is the Digital Twin of an Organization Adoption Program. It's for manufacturing specifically, with the generous support from NGen, which is the organization that supports Canada's Global Innovation Cluster for Advanced Manufacturing, and ACOA with their support of the Emerging Now co-op program at Dalhousie. So together, the Landmark and Digital Nova Scotia and Dalhousie Industrial Engineering Department will be working with 5 manufacturers over the coming year with co-op students to help them implement a digital twin of an organization in their environment. So that's just launched. And again, when you get the PDFs, there'll be a link here, or you can find this certainly on the Digital Nova Scotia. So basically, it'd be hiring a co-op student that's subsidized at 67% and getting some I'll show deep discounts through the funding with NGen to get established with a DTO here. This is for Atlantic Canadian SMEs. And we do have some of our own training if people are interested in learning a bit more, particularly on how to go about implementing a DTO. It's not really about a software tool. It's really around the process of defining where DTO can benefit your organization, how to do process analysis, where you would gather data, how to actually construct a DTO, and then learn new insights, and ultimately how you can run simulations. So that course is coming up. We run that 4 successive mornings, and starting on Monday, October 21st. So again, there's a link there, or you can get to that from the Landmark site as well. Okay, I think I've left about 5 minutes for questions. So I don't know, Giovanna, if there's anything in the chat, or is there any questions that I can answer, or they could just moderate that. That would be helpful.
Yes, we have one hand raised. You can unmute yourself if you'd like, or I can unmute you. Is it Ramya?
Yeah, hi. So I'm having one question here. You're showing me it in last slide. You're showing me how does the digital twin works in short. So I got a question there. What is the difference between enterprise resource planning and the digital twins? So both looks similar to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ERP basically is a great source of data to support digital twins. Many of our clients have ERP systems. I mean, Crosby is a good example. They use a system called SysPro, which is a kind of a specialist for manufacturing. And much of the data that supported efficiencies and throughputs and so on can be brought into that. Where ERP, typically they don't have, at least ones I'm familiar with, the value stream and look at total lead times. And sometimes the constraints of the capacity planning is not as strong as maybe activity-based planning. So the two can work definitely hand in hand. The financial information in the ERP can be loaded into the resources, bill of materials, for example. All of that can be this source of information, but then can be modeled a little bit differently using both the AVP and VSM approaches.
Okay, then like what is the outcome of a digital twin?
It's probably the blend of both operational and financial insights into understanding key activities and probably more importantly, where they can be improved, not only from a resource requirement point of view, and which ties to costing, but from a throughput, capacity and time to deliver point of view as well. So those are some of the key benefits in building the original digital twin. And then, as importantly, being able to use that kind of validated digital twin to do forecasting and planning into the future, where, as I tried to show, where we can change some of the data or we can change some of the business structure and look at the impact that would have before committing to it. And that's the key thing. So it can be save quite a bit of time and quite a bit of money. There's no shortage in my experience in dealing with clients. There's no shortage of ideas. There is a shortage in kind of the ability to execute on those ideas and figure out which idea is maybe the best. Where's the low hanging fruit? So a DTO can help assist in that regard.
Okay, and how like suppose if a small medium enterprise want to use digital twins, how much will it cost for them?
It's going to vary, depends on kind of what technology you're kind of landed on, and what kind of level of support that you have. Also will be impacted by somewhat the availability of the data, although that's never really a total limitation because a lot of data can be gathered, even if it's not systematized. That can be gathered and so on. So I would say, yeah, at I don't know, at the low end, you can probably get a DTO with some of those technologies done for $25,000 to $50,000. That could go up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Depends on the scope of your model. Typically, you're going to start in a pilot mode. You'll pick one area. If I go back to the Crosby example, they picked two production lines, and they did that modeling with some external support. Then they expanded that to do all of their dry pack line. They did most of that work with a little bit of coaching, and then they went on to their wet and their bulk handling facility and did that completely themselves. So you also have to look at the amount of resources internally you're able to commit to that as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time position. Again, depends on the size of the organization. So it's kind of a wide range, I'm afraid.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
I was on mute. And we'll move to some questions in the chat. So can DTO be used in the service industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the Nova Scotia Crown Lending is basically a service for loan processing. Last year, most Canadians will recognize the challenges Passport Canada had. We actually were asked to come in and help do some modeling around both the big mail processing facilities as well as their office facilities. Veterans Affairs over in PEI, we've done some work with them. In fact, I'd say, to be honest, we've probably done more service-related DTOs, and particularly public service, than in the private sector at the present time.
And can it be used in the construction industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that has a process, it and can be data associated with that process. Particularly in the value stream, I would see a big benefit in the construction industry with regard to let's focus on housing and all what's going on here in Halifax with the amount of housing and construction that's taking place and the lead times associated with that. So certainly from a value stream point of view and from a resource capacity point of view, I'm sure there are constraints that exist in that industry now when I drive around the city and see how much construction is happening.
For sure, for sure. And two more questions. For companies that have multiple industries, is it worth using DTOs?
Multiple industries. I'm not sure what the context of that is, but certainly multiple facilities. Yes, you can create a DTO on, I mean, you can basically create a DTO down to, you know, if you want to do it down on a production line basis, scale that up to the full facility. One benefit is where you have multiple facilities, you can actually create DTOs for each and then do comparative analysis and some benchmarking across that. So yeah, there's no process or business process that a DTO can't benefit in being able to create it. So there may be a variety within each industry. They may have specifics with regard to, you know, different resource issues or process flow issues, whatever. But again, you've got the basic building blocks with many of these DTO solutions that allow you to handle the full breadth of different industries and different businesses.
Awesome. And okay, I'll take one more. Are there examples of DTO being used in the aquaculture industry, finfish or shellfish?
I have not seen any. Ironically, I've done work in aquaculture here in Nova Scotia many years ago, but that was more in kind of the performance reporting around that. I would think certainly in processing, aquaculture processing, I mean, that is manufacturing to some degree, kind of a different raw material coming in, but there is a process associated with that. So yeah, I could see it. I don't have any examples personally of that, though. That's something we could drill into, and if somebody wanted to contact me, I can help them and direct them to some information we could find.
Awesome. And then last question. Somebody asked, how can we integrate a digital twin with our existing systems like ERP? And is there a way to track it?
Yeah, all of these systems will have the ability to bring data in, to import data into the twin. And obviously, as I showed in the, at least in that long-term care model where data can be exported and then analyzed, or results, I should say, should be exported. So yeah, I mean, the more data that's available, typically the faster some of these implementations will go. But again, I do want to stress we work with clients that don't have any ERP or advanced data collection systems, and they're still able to put together DTO models that are very, very helpful in insights. We can use estimates and kind of interviews and so on to get a validated model and get everybody kind of on the same page for that information.
Awesome. Awesome. That's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, Mike, for introducing us to DTO and for such an informative session. I think everybody has learned something today and can take something away. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks for tuning in, folks. And again, if you have any questions, there's my contact information. Happy to answer those.
Awesome. Awesome.
Oh, start.